Pray for the devil. A nun prepares to perform an exorcism and comes face to face with a demonic force with mysterious ties to her past. That's the synopsis from IMDb, and honestly, it sums up this experience pretty well. If I describe my experience with this movie in about a sentence or two, I would say that this movie isn't very original. It's not an okay movie. It's not a great movie. It lies somewhere in the middle, and honestly, if you're looking for a horror experience, this will satiate your appetite. That was a little bit longer than a sentence, but nonetheless, that's the experience I felt and had when I left this movie. So let's jump into what I really enjoyed about this movie. I gotta say, I thought the acting was actually pretty solid from the main leads. Were the performances awesome across the board? Not really. However, Jacqueline Byers as Annie, Christian Navarro as Father Dante, and Colin Salmon as the character who I can't remember his name. I know he's a priest. You see the most screen time from the three of them throughout this movie, and I think they do a great job of carrying that role. Colin Salmon has to play the calm, cool, and collected veteran leader in this movie. He does that very, very well. And Jacqueline Byers, whenever she's terrified, and same thing with Christian Navarro, whenever they're terrified on screen, you're really feeling it, and it really adds to the intensity that this movie brings in its scenes. Which I have to give this movie a lot of credit. The intensity, I really bought into it. Despite this movie not being the most original thing I've ever seen by a long shot, I really had my heart pounding throughout this movie for most of the runtime. And that really made the pacing actually quite solid, because as these scenes are going through, you really feel the peril that these characters are feeling. It evokes into you, and you're in for a pretty good time. Is this the scariest movie I've ever seen? No. Is it really intense? Absolutely. Are you gonna have a good time with it? I think so. And really, that's all you can ask for in a movie like this. Now, what did I not like so much about this movie? I thought the writing and the direction was just a little choppy. As this movie kind of progresses, you can feel it sort of start to get awkward, which is a really hard thing to do in a movie, is progress characters at an appropriate cadence. And I think the movie, for the most part, gets it right, but there are some instances where I'm like, I'm not quite sure if the character's really ready for this. And to be honest, if this movie was just about 10 minutes longer, I think it could have filled some of those gaps, which is a really rare criticism for me to have in a movie, is that it needs to be a little bit longer. But I think that 10 minutes of additional context could have made a bigger difference and really helped elevate some of these characters in their journeys. And additionally, although I thought this movie was really intense, I was not a fan of the fact that it utilized too many jump scares. It's not to say that this movie is necessarily a jump scare fest where you're having one every 10 seconds. However, I would say there's probably one every scene, which does get kind of old. And that predictability, it really wears on you. I mean, by the time the first 45 minutes of the movie were done, I could tell you when the next jump scare was coming. It just got kind of stale. Were the jump scares effective? I guess. Were they too much in quantity? I think so. Also, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but this movie also isn't the most original thing I've ever seen. And it's not to say that's necessarily a con of the movie. However, as a moviegoer like myself who craves originality and novelty in films, this film really lacked that. It seems like many horror films within about the last 10 to 15 years have played into the space of demons and the church and possession and all those other kinds of things, which if you've seen a lot of those kinds of movies in recent history, that can kind of fatigue on you after a while. So if you're going to this movie expecting a different spin in that space, you'll probably be disappointed. However, if you don't really care, you're gonna have a good time with it. And finally, I wasn't very convinced by what the story of the movie was telling me. As these characters are progressing, they make certain leaps and bounds throughout the film that feel really clunky, feel really out of place, or just not really believable. It kind of goes like this throughout the movie. It establishes its own rules, it establishes these characters. However, by the time the movie ends, these characters do things, they perform certain actions that totally compromise everything that the movie told us about them previously. And by the time that all wraps up, it really makes for a third act that feels very much haphazard. It feels very nonsensical, and it just feels kind of fake and a little jarring. Like, these characters are going through these major events in this last act, and you're like, this is kind of a bit of a stretch as to what's possible based on what the movie's told us. They'll do and say certain things, and it's like, I don't think the character would do that, or that explanation is pretty flawed. I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, just saying I didn't really buy into the story all that much by the time it wrapped up, and unfortunately made for the third act being the poorest of the entire movie. So friends, in the end, I'm gonna have to give this movie a 7 out of 10. If you're looking for a good horror film, I think this is it. It will satiate your appetite for some good scares. Bring a friend or two this Halloween weekend, go watch it, have a good time, and then move on to the next movie. Friends, thank you so much for watching another movie review. If you like this video, I'd be honored if you consider clicking the like button, clicking subscribe, or checking out these other end cards or the links down in the description below for your viewing pleasure. Once again, I've been Bryce, and until next time, happy Halloween.